Hello everyone, I'm Bruffy1322 and welcome to the Stewards room, where we'll be taking a look at racing incidents submitted by you guys and trying to make a determination on who, if anyone, was at fault. There's a link in the description to submit your own clips, and feel free to check out the playlist link for more of these videos, specifically the first, which acts as a scene setter. Also keep an eye out for cards popping up on screen towards the end of each segment, where you can vote on who you thought was at fault for each incident. So let's get straight in with our first clip, and the clips for this week are all going to be focused on unrealistic overtake attempts. So basically overtake attempts that will make a determination on whether we think that was a good idea to even go for that move, and then whether the person who went for the move was ultimately at fault for any ensuing crash after that. So this first one is the final lap of a multi-class endurance championship race in season 4. This was round 9, an hour and a half long race, and this is the very final few corners of the final lap. We see the car on our right hand side, who we're looking at his perspective, go for a move up the inside into that sort of sharp left-hander. He gets the move done and then obviously takes the position from that, and that was for, I believe, 3rd place in class. But let's go back and have a look at it. We'll slow it down as well. And for me, this one is kind of on the edge. I mean, you know, as always, we'll have the poll at the very end. It'll pop up in the top right and you can vote, and you can let me know in your comments down below, in the comments down below. And I always find it really interesting to see what you guys think in the comments, because a lot of the time there's some good discussion down there, and quite a lot of things I often agree with, and then there's some things that I definitely don't agree with either. But hopefully it's good, because these videos are meant to provoke some discussion and also be a bit of a learning experience for everybody involved. But this one, I'm personally on the side of this was a bit too much of an unrealistic overtake attempt. Now, when you look at it, there is a little bit of lag involved, as you tend to expect from GTA. So as you can see, we've got contact there, but we don't have any contact right there. So there is a little bit of that at play, but even with that in mind, I don't think that this is a realistic overtake attempt, because it's basically a dive bomb that only works because of the fact that contact was made. So let's go back to the Rules of Racing document that we always use, and specifically talking about overtakes up the inside. We've been over it many times during this series. So basically, to have a claim to the inside at the apex of the corner, the attacker needs to be more than halfway alongside at the apex. If they're less than halfway alongside, then any crash is the fault of the attacker. Now, there is a separate thing about dive bombing, as you can see just here. Moreover, the attacker should not have achieved this position by carrying too much speed into the corner. This method is called dive bombing. Now, dive bombing is something that you can do. That's absolutely fine. If you can get up the inside of someone by carrying too much speed into the corner, get it stopped, and then no accident or incident occurs from that, you don't cause any crashes or you don't hit the opposing driver, then that's fine. It's not just a case of all dive bombs are not allowed, but you can't just go steaming into the corner and say that you have claim to the inside of the corner because you're more than halfway alongside if you've taken far too much speed into that corner, and the only reason that you've even made the corner in the first place is because of any contact that you've had on the opposing driver, who is now on the outside. And I think that's what we have here. Now, I just want to play it again at full speed so you can get a general idea of the kind of speed that is taken into this corner, because there's quite a distance there between the two cars, and that is a huge closing distance, and essentially, for my eyes, the only way that the car on our right hand side gets that car stopped in time to be able to make the corner is because of the contact on the car on the outside. If that contact hadn't have happened, if he hadn't have been there, he would have gone quite wide on the outside of the corner. So personally for me, I think I would put the blame on this one at the car on the right hand side. The attacker in this instance, I believe, was in the wrong, and that would be a penalty for the attacking driver, because I think that was carrying way too much speed into the corner at such a huge closing distance. The contact occurs, at the back end of the car anyway, so he wasn't even fully halfway alongside to claim that. But it was just a case of, at the end, on the final few corners, at the end of a 90-minute race, you can be forgiven for trying a crazy move like that. But I think that was an unrealistic attempt to make a move stick there. And in the end, it just ended up being a case of steaming into the corner and knocking the other guy out of the way, to be honest. But you guys let me know what you think in the top right hand corner of the screen. The options will be either the attacker or the defender, the attacker being the car on the right hand side of the screen, the defender being the car on the left hand side of the screen. There should be a poll that pops up in the top right in the card. You can vote on it, and obviously let me know your thoughts down below in the comments as well if you've got anything to add to this. But for now, let's move on to the next clip. So our next two clips are actually follow-ups from the episode 7. You might recognize some of the cars and some of the incidents that we saw there. These same cars are involved in these, and supposedly, according to the person who submitted this clip, and the same was true for the same race in episode 7, both of the clips and this one as well was suggested to be a racing incident. At least the other people in the race said that this was a racing incident, and I can't understand how anyone could ever view that to be anything other than the fault of the blue and white car. Now, we've just gone over the idea of dive bombing. You're not allowed to take too much speed into the corner, and if you do try to do that, you do try to dive bomb someone up the inside, any crash that happens or any incident that happens through you because of you doing that, you are automatically at fault for it, essentially, because of the fact that it was a dive bomb and you took too much speed into the corner. And for me, that's exactly what happens here as well. The blue and white car here is so far back coming into the braking zone of the corner. I mean, this is quite the distance to the orange car. And he basically just doesn't brake, or just leaves his braking so late. And it's also the angle at which he tries to go for the corner. The racing line is naturally here and then turns in like that, and then you go along to the right on the next bit, whereas he's completely offline, and in a way it looks like he's just aiming for the orange car. And as we saw from the rules of racing, that's where the contact was as well. You can see quite clearly where the contact was, as we even saw, even if this wasn't a dive bomb, as we saw from the rules of racing, you have to be more than halfway alongside the defending car to have claim to the corner, and this absolutely wasn't the case. As we can see here from this example, just for the avoidance of any doubt, the attacker is less than halfway alongside. In this case, the attacker only has their front wing alongside the defender's rear wheel. The defender has the right to the racing line. A collision at the apex is entirely the fault of the attacker. And for me, that is about as clear-cut as it could possibly be. The point of contact, the front wing, the front wheel of the blue and white car is touching the rear left wheel of the orange car. Therefore, they're at the apex of the corner, and therefore the contact and any crash is entirely at the fault of the attacker for not being anywhere near alongside enough to warrant any space on the racing line. So yeah, pretty easy one, this one, to be honest, but I wanted to include it because, like I said, it was a follow-up to, well, it was an extension of episode 7, and I didn't want to include both clips in the same episode, despite them being both in the same video submission. And also just the sheer incredulousness of the other people in this race claiming that it was just a racing incident. I just can't get over that anyone who would even think about the rules of racing or trying to do proper racing would consider this, and a hit at that point, to be anything other than the fault of the blue and white car. But you guys might think differently. Let me know in the comments if you want, or vote in the top right. Maybe we'll see if the poll is 100. Maybe we can have a poll that's 100% or everyone thinking exactly the same way, that it's not the orange car's fault, it's not a racing incident, it's completely the fault of the blue and white car. But you never seem to get that on these polls. But yeah, the poll will be in the top right. Let me know what you think. But yeah, pretty clear-cut one, that one, I think. And again, this clip is another follow-up from one of the same races that we saw in episode 7. Basically, we see that the Force India there, the pink Force India, goes for an inside overtake. on the Toro Rosso, and this was the Toro Rosso that we saw in that episode 7 clip. And for me, again, like I've been saying, these are unrealistic overtake attempts. Now, you can see it already without even slowing it down, but we will again. It's the same idea. We're looking at incidents that are, inside overtakes. It's the same principle. You got to be more than halfway alongside at the apex without carrying too much speed into the corner. The point of contact we're at the apex now. This is the point of contact. You could argue that the pink car was more than halfway. Well, he was about halfway alongside the Toro Rosso, the blue car, and that would be then both cars' fault. But when you take into account the closing speed and the distance, this looks more to me, just like a bit of a takeout, to be honest, because he's just, especially in a corner like this, we saw it from a previous episode. It's the same corner that we had an incident before, and it's almost exactly the same incident that we saw from one of those earlier episodes. I think it was episode 2, where it's not a realistic place to go for an overtake, and really the contact actually happens before the apex. It happens here, and it is that's just, it's not really a realistic overtake attempt that's going to pay off in my eyes, and for me it just looks a bit too much like steaming in too much into the corner with too much speed, and it's a bit of a takeout in that way. And something that you've always got to be wary of is that not all corners are corners that you can overtake a car on. There's some corners that are higher speed things than others, and there's a lot of corners, especially in high downforce vehicles, like in the Formula 1 games, for example, where you're taking corners at such high speeds. There isn't always the opportunity to be able to get up the inside of someone effectively enough when they're meant to be taking the corner ahead of you at such a high speed, and I think that's the case here. This corner really, and as we've seen it already from one of the early episodes, it's not really a corner that you can effect an overtake like that on, unless you've got a significant advantage, coming up to someone. To be this far back, as we're seeing here, and try to put an overtake on someone, it's not really going to happen, because the braking that you're doing isn't enough. There's not enough of a braking zone to be able to outbrake your opponent, especially with the corner being relatively, it's a mid-speed corner. So yeah, I think it's just wasn't really the most realistic overtake attempt at this point for this one. It wasn't really going to pay off. Just almost exactly the same as what we saw from episode 2 and the same incident there. It wasn't really on that one, to be honest, for me. But you guys may think differently, obviously. Let me know if you do think differently down below in the comments and in the poll in the top right. But yeah, I think even when you see it, seeing it at full speed is more clear, to be able to see something like this as well, that it really was just an unrealistic attempt. Okay, so final clip, and this is the final corner of the race, coming up to it. Looks like we're going to go for an inside overtake, and contact happens, but manages to get the win. Was that me behind? I think that was me behind. Oh yeah, I remember this one now. I thought I was going to get a win out of this after a bit of a comeback, and I thought they were going to both take each other out, but he ended up being able to keep it. So this one, it's close, because this one isn't as much of an unrealistic attempt as the previous ones that we've just seen, because he is very, very close to the back of the other car. They both brake about the same time. He's well up the inside, but I would say not quite up the inside enough to say that it's none of his fault. It's about half and half. Now, the benefit of this one in comparison to the previous ones is that, like I said, it's not a dive bomb. This is more of a normal overtake attempt. It just didn't really come off. And I think it falls into this category here, where the attacker is approximately halfway alongside. If the attacker's front axle is ahead of the defender's rear axle and the two cars are approximately halfway alongside, both drivers have a reasonable claim to the apex. In that case, if contact occurs, blame will have to be shared. and it's in this zone that racing incidents can occur. So, in this kind of situation, the attacker is alongside enough such that the defender really should have left a bit more space, but he's not alongside enough that the attacker also shouldn't have, left space or maybe backed off a little bit. And I think that is shown with this one, because he essentially does get pretty much halfway alongside, which is exactly where he needs to be to make this a bit of a grey area. And for me, I would put this down to a racing incident, because it's not necessarily the most unrealistic overtake attempt. It's just that it is a higher speed corner, this one, and you probably have to be a little bit further alongside and braking a little bit later than what he was doing there to be able to effect an overtake properly without any contact. Now, there was contact, but the contact occurs. He's about halfway alongside the car in front. The contact occurs about there. They are at the apex of the corner, and I know it's slightly difficult to see, but you can kind of get the idea of where the rear of the car is to the middle of the attacker. He's about halfway alongside, and in that case, I think this would have to go down as a racing incident. At this point, if anything, to make this overtake better, the attacker should have braked a little bit later and forced the defender to go wide, made it not even a case to worry about, and he would have just been in front, and the defender would have had to back out. But even as it is right now, the defender really kind of tried to turn in to the corner, even though there was a car there. So the defender has to have some of the blame for what happened in that respect, but also the attacker has to have some blame because he wasn't far enough alongside to have complete right to the corner and the racing line. So for me, both of them would be to blame for this one, and I would put it down to a racing incident in exactly the way that it was described on the rules of racing. Like I said, it was just one of those things where both of them could have done something better, and ultimately one paid the price and the other one didn't. If only both of them had taken each other out, and I'd come through to win that one. But that is what it is. The poll will be in the top right. You can vote on who you thought was at fault for this one: attacker, defender, or racing incident. So that's pretty much it for this episode. Let me know your thoughts down below and in the polls on the video itself. You can find in the video description all info and links that you may need to submit your own clips. And if you'd like to support me, you can do so on Patreon by becoming a YouTube member or simply subscribing and liking the video. Thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.